Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Wednesday, July 17th, 2024. Ohio Senator J.D. Vance tells campaign donors at a luncheon in Milwaukee, "We're going to get out there and try to fire up the crowd tonight." It was his first public appearance as the Republican vice presidential nominee and comes before his primetime speech at the Republican National Convention. Vice President Kamala Harris campaigns in Kalamazoo, Michigan, condemning political violence. It was her first public comments about the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump. She called it a heinous, horrible, and cowardly attack. House Speaker Mike Johnson and the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, both Republicans, call on the Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheatle to resign, while the Homeland Security Department's Inspector General opens an investigation into the Secret Service's handling of security at that Donald Trump rally. President Joe Biden speaks to the Latino civil rights organization Unidos US, holding a conference in Las Vegas. The State Department responds to Donald Trump saying Taiwan should pay for its own defense. And in Great Britain, King Charles gives a speech at the state opening of Parliament for the just-elected Labour Party government led by Prime Minister Keir Starmer. The agenda includes economic growth and border security. Story from Associated Press: Donald Trump's running mate, J.D. Vance, will introduce himself to a national audience Wednesday night as he addresses the Republican National Convention. The Ohio senator's headlining address will be his first speech as the Republican vice presidential nominee. In fact, this year's gathering also is the first RNC that Vance has attended, according to a Trump campaign source who's not authorized to speak publicly. A relative political unknown, Vance rapidly morphed in recent years from a severe critic of Trump to an aggressive defender. The 39-year-old is positioned to become a potential leader of the former president's political movement, which has reshaped the Republican Party and broken longtime political norms. Vance is expected to lean into his biography as someone who grew up poor in Kentucky and Ohio, his mother addicted to drugs and his father absent, but went on to the highest level of U.S. politics. That story from Associated Press. This afternoon, Senator Vance spoke at a campaign event in Milwaukee, the site of the Republican National Convention, and the first 6 minutes were on camera.
All right. As much as, I'm a normal politician, I love a standing ovation, but you guys didn't come here to clap. You came here to hear from me, and I just want to say a few things. Now, first of all, we have some press in the background for the next 10 minutes here, so I have to be careful here. I don't want to give anything away for what I'm going to say tonight. I joke with the president that, I'm very excited about this evening, and I don't plan to screw it up, but if I do, it's too late. He made the pick, right? It's official now. We're going to get out there and try to fire up the crowd tonight and make the case, a very easy case to make, but an important case to make, that we have got to reelect President Donald J. Trump to the White House, right? Now, what I'll do here is talk a little bit about what is at stake in this election. I'll talk a little bit about what I'm going to try to do as his running mate, and I'll talk a little bit about why the Biden presidency has been such a complete failure. But what I'll do after my remarks actually is try to take some photos and hang out. If you've got anything you want me to sign. You guys are going to hear me speak tonight for a much longer time than you're going to hear me speak today, and I'd like to get and actually visit with you a little bit. So hopefully you're ready, because I'd love to just talk with people and answer some questions and take some photos. But I keep on thinking to myself, what's the best way? And this is part of what I've been going through as I think about what I'm going to say tonight. What is the best way to articulate why it is that reelecting President Trump is so important? And there are all these different sort of spins that you could take on it. One is, you could say, with apologies to our friends back there, the media has lied more aggressively and slanderously about a guy, and he keeps on coming through it. He keeps on persevering. He keeps on fighting. President Trump has taken everything that they've thrown at him, and he's come out stronger, and the country has come out better for his service. We should be grateful to him, and I know that all of us in this room absolutely are. But, it's the way that we saw that, the contrast between the lie that the media tells about President Trump and the man that all of us actually know. Of course, we saw it in really, really stark definition on Saturday. Because I'm sure that all of you had a similar reaction to me. You see the video, your friends start telling you that, oh my God, they just shot the president. And then when I first saw the clip, I was worried. You saw him go down, and I didn't know what was going on afterwards. I was so terrified that we had just lost a great president, but it would be an unbelievably terrible thing for our country in that moment in time. I was just so afraid for him and so afraid for our country. And then, of course, he stands up a minute later after they shot him. They literally shot him. And he raises his fist in the air, and he says, "Fight, fight, fight." He fires up the crowd. But this is where the media was really dishonest, and I think they really miss what the man is made of, because after he literally got shot, came within millimeters of losing his life in the service of this country, what did he do? I remember what I did. I was pissed. As soon as I knew he was okay, I felt relief, and then I was like, I cannot believe an assassin tried to take down the President of the United States. I was mad about it. Was he mad and angry? He called for national unity. He called for calm. He showed leadership, my friends, that the media keeps on saying they want somebody to tone down the temperature. Well, Donald Trump got shot and he toned down the temperature. That's what a real leader does. There's another spin on the contrast again between Joe Biden and Donald Trump that I think it's important to take on. President Trump obviously is one of the most successful real estate executives in the history of our country. Of course, the Trump name became synonymous with luxury and with beauty in the real estate world. And Joe Biden, of course, likes to pretend that he's just Scranton Joe. I don't think Joe Biden knows much about what he is or isn't these days. But, the guy who actually connects with working people in this country is not fake Scranton Joe, it's real President Donald Trump. Because they know.
Senator J.D. Vance, Republican from Ohio, the Republican vice presidential nominee, today in Milwaukee.
Because they know that he has their best interests at heart. They know that when he was president for 4 years, groceries and gas and energy and housing were actually affordable to a normal person in this country. And after 4 years of the Biden administration, the basic trappings of a good middle-class life have become less and less attainable. In my home state of Ohio, the average Ohio family is about $10,000 poorer than they were 4 years ago. And of course, Ronald Reagan famously asked in a great debate, I think it was Jimmy Carter, he said, are you better off, he asked the American people in a debate with Jimmy Carter, I should say, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? And I wasn't alive when he asked that question, but I know millions of Ohio families who would answer that question with a resounding no. And if you asked the opposite question, were you better off in 2019, in 2020 than you were in 2016, those same exact families would say, absolutely yes. It is time to go back to the leadership of Donald Trump. It is time to get rid of the corrupt Biden-Harris regime that has broken this country, that has ruined its reputation in the world, and most importantly, has made a basic middle-class life less affordable for our citizens. Let's get rid of him, and let's bring Donald Trump back to the White House.
Senator J.D. Vance, Republican from Ohio, Republican vice presidential nominee, speaking to campaign donors today in Milwaukee, his first official act as the vice presidential nominee. The first 6 minutes of his remarks were allowed to be on camera. The nominee speaks tonight at the Republican National Convention. We'll have live coverage. The convention starts at 7 p.m. Eastern on C-SPAN radio and television. Vice President Kamala Harris, the presumptive Democratic vice presidential nominee, posted a video this morning about Senator Vance.
Hey, everyone. So Donald Trump has picked his new running mate, J.D. Vance. Trump looked for someone he knew would be a rubber stamp for his extreme agenda, and make no mistake, J.D. Vance will be loyal only to Trump, not to our country. And unlike Mike Pence, Vance said he would have carried out Trump's plan to overturn the 2020 election. He supports a national abortion ban and voted against protecting IVF. And if elected, he will help implement the Extreme Project 2025 plan for a second Trump term, which would target critical programs like Head Start and Medicare. but we are not going to let that happen.
Vice President Kamala Harris posting that video. Her campaign says she has offered to take part in a CBS-hosted debate with Senator Vance on Monday, August 12th, and they were waiting for Senator Vance's response. And a response came from Trump campaign senior advisor Brian Hughes. It reads, "We don't know who the Democrat nominee for vice president is going to be, so we can't lock in a date before their convention. To do so would be unfair to Gavin Newsom, J.B. Pritzker, Gretchen Whitmer, or whoever Kamala Harris picks as her running mate." Vice President Harris traveled today to Kalamazoo, Michigan for a campaign stop, and at the start of her remarks, she spoke about the assassination attempt against Donald Trump, Republican presidential nominee this year, and also about political violence in general and the race for the White House.
I do want to discuss briefly what happened on Saturday. I've not had a chance yet to publicly talk about it, but I will say a few words about the attempt on the life of former President Trump over the weekend. As we all know, it was a heinous, horrible, and cowardly act. My husband Doug and I are thankful he was not seriously injured. That day, as soon as we saw what was happening, we said a prayer for his well-being. And our thoughts immediately turned to Melania, who we have met, and their family. The bottom line is no one should have to fear for the safety of a loved one because they serve in public office. Our heart goes out to the family of Corey Comparator, a true hero who died protecting his family. And Doug and I, of course, are holding them close in our hearts. We are also wishing those who were critically injured that day a swift and full recovery. And we are thankful to the United States Secret Service, the first responders, and local authorities. The United States of America, I believe, is the greatest democracy the world has ever known. Yes. But in the aftermath of this weekend's shooting, one of the questions we now confront is about the way we should engage with one another in this campaign. On Sunday evening, our President Joe Biden issued a call for unity. And there must be unity around the idea that while our nation's history has been scarred by political violence, violence is never acceptable. There can be no equivocation about that. At the same time, the hallmark of American democracy, the hallmark of any democracy, is a strong competition of ideas, policies, and a vision for the future. And just as we must reject political violence, we must also embrace a robust discussion about what is at stake in this election. The surest way to reaffirm the strength of our democracy is by engaging in a vigorous and civil exchange of ideas. And one of the ideas and one of the principles that is at stake in this election is the issue of reproductive freedom. And that is why I am here today to discuss that topic, and I look forward to our conversation. Thank you all very much.
Vice President Kamala Harris today in Kalamazoo, Michigan. Story from Associated Press. The Department of Homeland Security's Inspector General said Wednesday it had opened an investigation into the Secret Service's handling of security for former President Donald Trump on the day a gunman tried to assassinate him at a Pennsylvania rally. In a brief notice posted on the Inspector General's website, the agency said the objective of the probe is to evaluate the United States Secret Service's process for securing former President Trump's July 13th, 2024 campaign event. President Joe Biden already had directed an independent review of the security at the rally. That was from Associated Press. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, today in a Fox News interview called on the Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheatle to resign.
we're going to move quickly. I'll be setting up on Monday a task force, a special task force within the House, and the reason we're going to do it that way is because that is a more precision strike. It goes quicker. There's not a lot of the procedural hurdles, and we'll have subpoena authority for that task force as well. It'll be compiled to Republicans and Democrats to get down to the bottom of this quickly so the American people can get the answers that they deserve. Since the assassination attempt, within hours, I was on the phone with Secretary Mayorkas at Homeland Security. He did not have satisfactory answers at that time. I've since spoken to leaders at the FBI, the Director of National Intelligence. They also there's real questions. Let's just put it that way. The answers have not been forthcoming. I think they're gathering data. We're going to do it as well. We have to have accountability for this. It was inexcusable. Obviously, there were security lapses. You don't have to be a special ops expert to understand that. And we're going to get down to the bottom of it quickly.
Do you think the U.S. Secret Service director should resign?
I'm going to call for her resignation as well. I think it's inexcusable, just beyond the classified parts, the things that we all understand. Her explanation to the media that there was a slant on the roof, so there was safety concerns.
There was a slant for the shooter too.
Come on, I mean,
exactly.
It doesn't wash, and I think she's shown what her priorities are. I don't know her personally, but we'll be asking lots of questions.
Have you reached out to her to speak with her directly?
I haven't. She's lower on the totem pole in the chain, so to speak, of the persons I've talked to. But obviously, the buck does stop at her desk on some of this.
There is a public hearing scheduled for her to appear on Monday.
Yes.
As of now, is that going to happen?
Well, we certainly hope so. I mean, it was the right step for our Oversight Committee and Homeland Security Committees to step forward and notice hearings. But we're hearing rumblings this morning that Mayorkas may not allow her to attend.
House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, interviewed today on Fox News Channel, and the Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, Republican from Kentucky, posting on X, last week's near assassination of former President Trump was a grave attack on American democracy. The nation deserves answers and accountability. New leadership at the Secret Service would be an important step in that direction. Also today, the U.S. Senate and House Representatives received separate all-member virtual briefings on the attempted assassination of former President Trump from the Secret Service Deputy Director and the Deputy FBI Director, according to CNN. Andrew Desiderio, Punchbowl News senior congressional reporter, posting on X, Senate briefing on Trump rally shooting just concluded. Top lines per two senators on the call. The shooter visited the rally site a few days in advance to scope it out. 62 minutes elapsed between the time the shooter was photographed as being suspicious and when he fired the shots. 20 minutes elapsed between the time he was spotted by snipers and when he fired the shots. FBI Director Wray said there's no known foreign nexus, but no established motive as of now. Shooter used encrypted comms and had little to no social media presence. That was the post from reporter Andrew Desiderio of Punchbowl News. The Secret Service Director, Kimberly Cheatle, was interviewed Tuesday night on CNN.
You said that local law enforcement was responsible for that building. What did you mean by that?
So Secret Service respects local law enforcement, and we could not do our job either investigatively or on our protective mission without them. In Pennsylvania, in fact, on that same day, they were also working the First Lady trip and a vice presidential trip. So I understand the constraints that they're under, and as I said earlier, we couldn't do our job without them. At that particular site, we divided up areas of responsibility, but the Secret Service is solely responsible for the design and the implementation and the execution of the site. And that's what I was trying to stress, was that we just divided up areas of responsibility, and they provided support to those areas of responsibility.
And you mentioned the First Lady's also event in Pittsburgh. You guys have a lot of areas to cover. Were any assets diverted from the former president's rally to her detail?
No, there were no assets from the Secret Service that were diverted at all.
Okay, so no one swapped out any of the posts, for example?
No.
Okay. CNN, of course, has reporting that the Secret Service increased security for former President Trump because of a credible threat from Iran. I've spoken with several people who look at the perimeter, hearing that news, look at the perimeter and say, how, knowing that there was a credible threat against the former president, how could that perimeter be so small that it excluded a building just 150 yards away from the podium?
I can't get into the specifics of any threats, but obviously with all of our protectees, we're constantly monitoring the threats that are out there, and we design our security plan based on that, also depending on the venue and the environment that we're in. And on that particular day, a full advance had been completed, but this is also why we are doing an internal review, and we look forward forward to the external review as well. And obviously, if there are things that we need to change about our policies or our procedures or our methods, we are certainly going to do so.
Was that perimeter too small?
The perimeter encompassed the area that we needed to secure for the event that we had on that day. What happened is a terrible incident and should never happen, and we are obviously going to make sure that moving forward, we take whatever lessons that come out of this and adjust accordingly.
Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheatle interviewed on CNN Tuesday night. In Milwaukee, Mayor Cavalier Johnson, a Democrat, gave his daily news conference about the Republican National Convention taking place in his city this week. He spoke about the armed homeless man who was shot and killed by police from Columbus, Ohio, on Tuesday. He said he knows of no connection to the political convention.
I was saddened by the death yesterday afternoon as a result of an officer-involved shooting. Absolutely no one wanted this outcome, and I anticipate a full as well as thorough investigation. The deceased individual had family, had friends, and my thoughts certainly are with them. My thoughts are also with the police officers from Columbus, Ohio. I'm sure they did not expect to be drawn into a tragic situation such as the one that they were involved in yesterday. The information we have leaves a clear impression that these Columbus officers, they saved the life of an unarmed man from death or perhaps serious injury. I spoke just yesterday with my counterpart in Columbus, Mayor Andrew Ginther, and we agreed to stay in communication about the situation that took place here yesterday. Other than the fact that out-of-town officers were involved in this incident, I know of no other connections to the convention. The location of the shooting was across the freeway, more than 3/4 of a mile from the front door of Pfizer Forum.
Milwaukee Mayor Cavalier Johnson holding his daily news conference this morning on the streets in Milwaukee. This is Washington Today. The theme of the Republican National Convention, day number 3, according to the organizers, is Making America Strong Once Again. There'll be a focus on military and foreign policy. The speakers tonight include Vice Presidential nominee Senator J.D. Vance and his wife, Mrs. Usha Vance. Also, Donald Trump Jr. and Donald Trump's granddaughter, Kai Trump, Texas Governor Greg Abbott, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, Kellyanne Conway, former counselor to President Trump, and members of Congress, including Matt Gaetz of Florida, Ronnie Jackson of Texas, and Nancy Mace of South Carolina. Also, Peter Navarro, former Donald Trump White House trade advisor, who was released from prison today after serving 4 months for not complying with the subpoena from the congressional January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol Investigative Committee. Live coverage of the Republican National Convention, day number 3, 7 p.m. Eastern on C-SPAN Radio and C-SPAN Television, streamed at cspan.org, or listen and watch anywhere on the C-SPAN Now mobile app. One of Tuesday night's speakers at the Republican National Convention was Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, a former presidential candidate who had challenged Donald Trump for the nomination. And Ron DeSantis spoke today at a Florida Republican Party breakfast in Milwaukee.
I just want to start off and kind of make a little bit of amends. Like, look, I was pretty hard on Joe Biden last night. It was merited. It was merited. Everything I said was true. But, in the spirit of unity, I just want to say that I sure hope he ends up with the Democratic nomination for President of the United States. I mean, to watch, it wasn't just that debate, but I think the fact that he was there for 90 minutes and people just saw, we had been seeing it. I've been saying this for years, and I've been dealing with him as governor for a long time. But then to do it, and then every single day, just not even being able to string sentences together and all this other stuff. If someone brought a candidate for mosquito control board appointment to me in Florida, and it was someone like Biden, there's no way I would appoint him to the mosquito control board. So he's not fit to lead. But I do think if the Democrats want to go down this road, I think that's the best possible scenarios for Republicans. And so I hope he sticks it out. It's kind of interesting because obviously there wasn't a convention in 2020. If you go back in the previous year's conventions, the Florida delegation was always kind of like the bee's knees from the sense of, as Florida went, so went the nation. Like, we knew Florida was going to be tough, we knew it was going to be tight, and we knew that if a Republican running for president didn't win Florida, the chance of getting elected president was close to zero. And so it was like Florida, Florida, Florida. Well, there's some positives to that because people look and everything, but there's also some positives to the fact that we're already in the column now. People don't even think about Florida anymore. It's not viewed as the most important because we just assume.
Governor Ron DeSantis, Republican from Florida, former presidential candidate, speaking this morning at a breakfast hosted by the Florida Republican Party, held in Milwaukee, site of the Republican National Convention. Governor DeSantis and former South Carolina governor and U.S. ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, former Republican presidential candidate herself, who had challenged the nominee, Donald Trump, spoke last night at the convention. C-SPAN spoke this morning with Ruth Conniff, Wisconsin Examiner, editor-in-chief, about those speeches.
Well, they were sort of necessary because they were the most prominent opponents of Donald Trump at one time. I think more Nikki Haley than Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis sounded a lot like Donald Trump. He has the same kind of insult humor style, threw a lot of red meat to the crowd about Joe Biden. He had his Weekend at Bernie's line, which was obviously designed to be the line that lasted from that speech. Nikki Haley was really the last best hope of the opponents of Donald Trump within the Republican Party. So for her to pledge her support and try to make the pitch that she made was really significant. And what she said was, even if you don't agree with Donald Trump 100% of the time, you should still vote for him, not for Joe Biden. And then she drew on her foreign policy experience to basically blame Biden for Putin's invasion of Ukraine, for Hamas's attack on Israel, things that obviously Biden didn't have much to do with. But her pitch is to more centrist, more moderate, more Reagan-esque Republicans that they should, swallow this pill and endorse Donald Trump. And people were voting for her after she had already dropped out because they saw her as a representative of a different vision for the Republican Party. So she was doing her best to call for unity. She criticized divisiveness. And there's a paradox there because, of course, the Donald Trump campaign is really the most divisive campaign in American history. And so, she was trying to make the case that in the name of unity, people should get behind that.
Ruth Conniff, Wisconsin Examiner, editor-in-chief, on C-SPAN's Washington Journal program this morning. Still another former Republican primary challenger to Donald Trump, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, is scheduled to speak tonight at the Republican National Convention, and this morning he was at a discussion in Milwaukee on economic policy, asked about the presidential election.
How do you see things going in the election? What do you think is the path to victory? What do you think Donald Trump has to do to win?
Well, I think we're in an incredible position versus where we were 3 weeks ago, and there's just been win after win after win, and in the middle of that, something that was horrifyingly millimeter away from chaos and mourning. But when Donald Trump won that debate, that wasn't like winning a debate. That was a knockout. I mean, that was like a Rocky-style knockout. And he didn't just knock out a candidate that got exposed, that has been a giant conspiracy hiding President Biden's condition, that everybody's been complicit on it, and including Vice President Harris, everybody around the White House, the media. I think if all of you weren't surprised, if all you watched was MSNBC and then you saw that, you're like shocked because you've been told that, hey, this guy's a rocket science behind closed doors, and then you're seeing what you can't unsee what you saw with your eyes that night, no matter how much positioning and spinning they do. But so the whole ruling regime that was put together in 2020, Elizabeth Warren nominating everybody that, for all of the stuff that's driving every company crazy across, her appointees in FTC, SEC, and all these other places that are affecting mergers and regulations, all the climate warriors that are bearing a state like North Dakota with 30 plus rules and regulations, and just one of those is the smallest one is 800 pages. They typically are 1,400 pages. We've run out of lawyers in North Dakota trying to fight the federal government on regulation. And Arthur talked about the president being the greatest president, the other thing that he did was he got rid of a lot of regulation during the time that he was in office, which is a relief. So there's that win that night threw their party into complete disarray, so that would be great. Then the next morning, Supreme Court cases started coming in, the Chevron deference, which is going to help the economy. That's a big win, yes. And then you have these other court cases that have been win for the president. And then, of course, this a millimeter away from a complete change in history on Saturday night. And then that, I think, created an image which is real. President Trump's first response when he got up was the courage, the resilience, the spirit, the fight, and that picture, which will now be in children's school books 100 years from now, of him with his fist up, with the flag flying over his head. That contrast versus Joe Biden. I mean, again, if you're an independent or you're a Democrat, you look at that and you say, "Wow, we have two different things going on." And in a world where we're in a proxy war with Iran, we're in a proxy war with Russia, we're in a cold war with China, President Trump is actually a deterrent himself. I mean, people look at President Trump and they if we do something, he'll do something back. I mean, he's a deterrent. He's like a national security. Joe Biden, they look at him and go, "Hey, we can do whatever we want, and he's not going to do anything." I mean, we're empowering a terrorist group, we're empowering countries, we empower Putin, and then Joe Biden's energy policies are funding Iran and Russia. Those countries are benefiting from his effort to shut down U.S. energy. That's helping those countries. Iran's production is up under Joe Biden. North Dakota's production is down under Joe Biden. That's all you need to know.
Governor Doug Burgum, Republican from North Dakota and a former presidential candidate, at a program today in Milwaukee, site of the Republican National Convention held by the group Committee to Unleash Prosperity. Congressman Adam Schiff, Democrat from California, in a statement to the Los Angeles Times today, calling on President Joe Biden to drop out of the presidential race, joining well over 20 other House Democrats who have done so. Congressman Schiff said that Biden has been one of the most consequential presidents in our nation's history, and his lifetime of service as a senator, a vice president, and now as president has made our country better. But our nation is at a crossroads. A second Trump presidency will undermine the very foundation of our democracy, and I have serious concerns about whether the president can defeat Donald Trump in November. While the choice to withdraw from the campaign is President Biden's alone, I believe it is time for him to pass the torch. Part of the statement today from Congressman Adam Schiff, Democrat from California, who is also the Democratic nominee for U.S. Senator from California. And from Associated Press, President Joe Biden is trying to shore up support among disenchanted voters, key to his re-election chances, as he meets Wednesday with members of a Latino civil rights organization in the battleground state of Nevada. Biden is set to deliver an address to the Unidos U.S. annual conference in Las Vegas, where he'll announce that beginning August 19th, certain U.S. citizen spouses without legal status can begin applying for permanent residency and eventually citizenship without having to first depart the country, according to the White House. Biden is also expected to use the speech to spotlight that the Latino unemployment rate is near a record low. More people in the community have been able to obtain health insurance, and the federal government has doubled the number of Small Business Administration loans to Latino business owners since 2020, reporting from Associated Press. Wall Street today, the Dow up 243, NASDAQ down 512, S&P down 78. Washington today continues in a moment.
Hi, I'm Susan Swain. This summer, I'll be on the air from Milwaukee and Chicago for C-SPAN's live gavel-to-gavel convention coverage. It's been a mainstay of our network since 1984. What has changed in recent years is C-SPAN's funding, now challenged by the many homes who have opted to cut the cord. This summer, an anonymous donor is generously helping support C-SPAN with a matching gift campaign. Every dollar given will be matched up to $25,000. Please consider giving to support our no-commentary convention coverage and all of C-SPAN's public affairs programming. To learn more or to make a donation, find us at cspan.org/donate. Thank you.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and also wherever you find your podcasts. Story from Reuters: Taiwan should pay the U.S. for its defense as it does not give the country anything. Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump told Bloomberg Businessweek, sending shares of Taiwanese chip manufacturer TSMC lower on Wednesday. I know the people very well, respect them greatly. They did take about 100% of our chip business, I think. Taiwan should pay us for defense, Trump said in an interview on June 25th that was published on Tuesday. You know, we're no different than an insurance company. Taiwan doesn't give us anything. Article continues, the United States is Taiwan's most important international supporter and arms supplier, but they have no formal defense agreement, unlike what Washington has with South Korea and Japan. The U.S. is, however, bound by law to provide Taiwan with the means to defend itself. Reporting from Reuters. The State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller was asked about this at his news conference.
State Department worried or have any thoughts on Donald Trump's comments on Taiwan? First of all, do you agree with what he said, that Taiwan should pay for its defense? And second, it raises the question of what the next president, whomever it is, would do in case there were an attack against a Chinese attack against Taiwan. I wonder if those comments worry you in any way or form or another.
So I think I said this yesterday. It's going to be a tricky few months where I have to walk the line of what I can and can't say about remarks that are made on the campaign trail. But I will point out that Taiwan has been paying for its own defense. Taiwan has been purchasing military equipment from the United States to the tune of billions of dollars. And the military equipment that they have purchased supports American manufacturing, supports American industry, supports American technology. So the purchases that they have made not only are important, we believe, to regional security, but are important to the United States economy. Now, there is money that was contained in the recently passed supplemental bill that gives us, for, I believe, the first time, the ability to provide Taiwan with drawdown authority and other weapons from U.S. stocks. But that is a new authority. If you look at the support that we have provided, or the security cooperation that we have provided them over decades, it has been Taiwan actually purchasing military from the United States. It has not been in any way charity from the United States. And I would just point out that we continue to believe that cross-strait peace and stability is essential to the United States. It's essential to the American people. It's essential to the global economy. And the United States, of course, is inherently wrapped up in the global economy. And anything that contributes to instability across the Taiwan Strait can potentially damage the economy here at home. So that's why these issues are so incredibly important.
State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller at his news conference at the State Department in Washington today. Ronen and Orna Nutra, who live in New York, are the parents of 22-year-old Omer Nutra, an American-Israeli citizen and tank commander in the Israeli army who was kidnapped by Hamas during the October 7th, 2023 attack on Israel. Ronen and Orna Nutra will speak tonight at the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. Former President Donald Trump, Republican presidential nominee, has criticized President Joe Biden for not securing the release of American hostages held by Hamas. There are at least 8 among the approximately 120 hostages that are still known to be held. President Biden has said Hamas and Israel have agreed to the principles of a ceasefire and hostage release deal, but negotiations are still ongoing. Roger Carstens, special presidential envoy for hostage affairs at the State Department, was interviewed today by Courtney Cubie, national security and Pentagon correspondent for NBC News at the Aspen Institute in Aspen, Colorado.
What about the hostages in Gaza? Are they your cases? And if so, if not, why not?
So our case handles, the cases that come to me are wrongful detainees that are taken by a nation state. Or it can be in conjunction with the hostage recovery fusion cell, a hostage case. Now, the difference is a wrongful detainee is taken by a nation state like Russia. A hostage case, think of Hamas, Jainim, Al-Qaeda, a terrorist group taking someone. And the nation state cases come right to me. The hostage cases are owned by the hostage recovery fusion cell, but we participate when it comes time to work on the diplomatic negotiation. So with those that are held by Hamas in Gaza, those cases actually belong to the hostage recovery fusion cell. The diplomatic effort to get them out falls within my level of responsibility. However, since really October 7th, this has really captivated the nation's attention. It's a whole of government effort. And I think everyone's been following the news, I would imagine, to where you've seen the President of the United States go to Israel. My boss, Secretary Tony Blinken's made numerous trips. Jake Sullivan, CIA Director Bill Burns, Brett McGurk. There's a whole of government effort to negotiate for their release. And so in this case, I'm not necessarily the one sitting across the table negotiating. And I'm okay with that because you can't have an ego in this business. In fact, we have a saying in our office that we don't care who comes up with a plan, who negotiates, or who gets the credit, as long as the job's getting done. And with Gaza, our nation's definitely, they have their foot on the gas and the car's moving forward.
Since you like to talk about how the negotiations are going, can you give us any update on, what can you give us anything on the latest on the Americans in Gaza?
I'll revert to the angel and the devil that are on my shoulders. It's one of those cases, it's just in motion. And the funny thing is, even if I did tell you, when I look at my watch, things may have already changed. But it's best to just let the people that are forward do what they need to do and not talk about it in public.
Roger Carstens is Special Presidential Envoy for Hostage Affairs at the State Department, interviewed today by NBC reporter Courtney Cubey at the Aspen Security Forum held at the Aspen Institute in Aspen, Colorado. Story from the New York Times, Israel's military has said that it had killed or captured around 14,000 combatants in Gaza since the war there began more than 9 months ago, an unverifiable and ambiguous number that gives a measure of Israel's assessment of its progress toward Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's stated goal of destroying Hamas. And from Associated Press, Hamas-led armed groups committed numerous war crimes during the October 7th attack on southern Israel that participated in the ongoing war in the Gaza Strip, according to a global human rights group report released Wednesday. Secretary of State Antony Blinken opened a meeting in Washington today of the America's Partnership for Economic Prosperity. That was a group created by President Biden 2 years ago to promote economic integration among a dozen nations: the U.S., Barbados, Canada, Chile, Colombia, Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, Mexico, Panama, Peru, and Uruguay. Secretary Blinken met with the foreign ministers from those countries at the State Department in Washington.
Well, good morning, everyone. Bienvenidos a Washington. It's so good to have so many friends here from all across the hemisphere. We wanted to give you, as I said to a couple of colleagues, the warmest possible greeting. We may have overcorrected because I think we've had the 2 hottest days on record in Washington in almost 100 years, but take that in the spirit with which it's intended, which is a warm welcome here. From Canada to Chile, we are bound together by history and geography, by ties of family and community, by trade and commerce. We're linked by common challenges as well, from climate change to irregular migration to unequal opportunity. And we're linked by shared hopes for a more secure, a more prosperous, a more democratic future for all of our countries and all of our peoples. These collective aspirations and the conviction that we could better achieve them by working together led President Biden to launch the America's Partnership for Economic Prosperity just 2 years ago at the Summit of the Americas in Los Angeles. This partnership is part of a broader effort to modernize our economic relationships, to grow our economies from the bottom up and from the middle out, to demonstrate that the way to boost our competitiveness is to enhance protections for our workers, as well as for our climate, to make our supply chains more resilient, to commit to the trust, safety, and openness of our digital infrastructure, and to show that our interdependence can actually be a source of strength, not a vulnerability, for our people, for our economies, for our democracies. That's the purpose of the partnership. And in just these past 2 years, our 12 countries have made significant progress in lifting up our communities and further unlocking the potential of all of our people.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken at the State Department today with the foreign ministers of the dozen countries in the America's Partnership for Economic Prosperity. Story from ABC News. The new government in the United Kingdom will focus on attempting to drive economic growth, modernizing border security, and nationalizing the country's rail networks, King Charles III said on Wednesday, reading a speech written by the Labour government he authorized. Those efforts were included in the more than 3 dozen bills that were expected to be introduced as the new government begins its legislative agenda, according to the speech. The new government under Prime Minister Keir Starmer of the center-left Labour Party arrives after voters dealt a crushing defeat earlier this month to the Conservative Party, ending a 14-year rule. That was from ABC News. Here is part of the King's speech.
My Lords and members of the House of Commons, my government will govern in service to the country. My government's legislative programme will be mission-led and based upon the principles of security, fairness and opportunity for all. Stability will be the cornerstone of my government's economic policy, and every decision will be consistent with its fiscal rules. It will legislate to ensure that all significant tax and spending changes are subject to an independent assessment by the Office for Budget Responsibility. Bills will be brought forward to strengthen audit and corporate governance alongside pension investment. Securing economic growth will be a fundamental mission. My government will seek a new partnership with both business and working people and help the country move on from the recent cost of living challenges by prioritizing wealth creation for all communities. My ministers will establish an Industrial Strategy Council. It is my government's objective to see rising living standards in all nations and regions in the United Kingdom.
King Charles III, the first minute and a half of a 12-minute speech written by the new Labour Party-led government in the United Kingdom at today's state opening of British Parliament in the House of Lords Palace of Westminster in London. Part of the lavish ceremony, he arrived in the Diamond Jubilee state coach pulled by 6 gray horses accompanied by Queen Camilla. The king wearing the red robe of state and the imperial state crown originally made for Queen Victoria's coronation in 1838. The tradition of the king's speech dates back to 1660, first given by King Charles II. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Have a good night.